The theme today is remembering, and many of us who are outside, or maybe just on the just outside here, will have thought about people that we have known or people that we've known of. Most of us don't have first-hand experiences of people lost through war, but many of us can identify with those who have. I don't want us to repeat those memories and thoughts, but to think about the importance of memories for each of us in our Christian walk. So here's the question: how is your memory? How are you remembering? On Monday mornings, I meet with a group of other older people in the life of this church, upstairs in the upper room, and often we begin by asking who went to church the previous day. Of course, it's a Monday, so it's the previous day. And very commonly, oh, it was a lovely service, a good talk. What was it about? Some of us have got less than 24-hour memories, and it's a bit like this pair of golfers. Honestly, this is something that Chris and I sometimes experience. I saw you hit the ball, but I have no idea. I can't remember where it went. And so we go looking on either side of the fairway to think, where did it go? But joking loss, memory loss is dementia, Alzheimer's are, of course, terrible conditions as we get older. I've recently met two old college friends, both of whose wives are suffering from Alzheimer's. And even one could not remember the names of her 3 children. So it's a ghastly disease and something that wakens us up to our mortality. For me, last week, I was singing in the Abbey in the Bath Park Choir that I'm a member of, and we had to learn Fauré's Requiem by heart. And that was difficult. It gets harder as we get older. And goodness knows how Judi Dench manages to do what she does at the age of 89, remembering sonnets and all the speeches that she learns. One thing I do know that we remember best of all are the things that we are passionate about. You've all got various passions. And the person I'm closest to, Diane, who's sitting at the back there, is passionate about gardening, and she remembers the words of every plant pretty well in our garden. And I think, how does she do that? I know that it begins with a P, but I don't know what the word is. But she just rattles it off, partly because she's so much younger than me. And better looking too. In the Bible, there are 231 times when the word remember is used. And I expect some of you could rattle them off. A few of them, but you're not going to, so because you're all being very well behaved this Sunday morning. Perhaps the most important is this one. And it's interesting that we have in front of us this engraving in here. Do this in remembrance of me. It is the most primary service that Christians have. To remember the Lord's death, his suffering for us. John Wesley took the Lord's Supper every 4 or 5 days because he was convinced of its importance in changing his heart. And at the school that I taught at, there was the table, his own communion table, that is still there. And we just think back, or used to think back to him. In the book that we've recently been using for our talks, we've been reading about Venerable Bede recording that St. Cuthbert, when he was presiding over the communion service back in the 7th century, would often be in tears as he brought to mind the passion and death of the Lord. I think this is interesting that we've got these beautiful poppies around us here, and one of them is like a red carpet. It's as though we're saying, Jesus is here. He is the most important person here today. And we're remembering, of course, not only the sacrifice of all those people in the various wars, but also his primary sacrifice for us. And the question I want to ask you is, when we have communion together, are we moved by it, or do we see it simply as a kind of contract? This is the way that I've become forgiven and free. Or is it something that reminds us so much that it's an important entry to our new life? Now, there are a number of other things that it's important to remember, and there are a lot of them that you will remember and think of important, but these are things that occurred to me over the last few days. The first thing is that our citizenship is in heaven. It isn't really here. We're told that in 1 Corinthians, that we actually are aliens and strangers in the world. We don't really belong. We're told by Peter and Paul that we're living as strangers in a foreign land, and that culture and values of the world here that can weaken our passion to live for God. And we're reminded of that in Romans chapter 12, which is that we... Well done, Andrew. We'll be there. It's the next one. Yeah. He tells us in Romans 12, verse 2, don't be so affected by, adjusted to the culture that you fit into it without even thinking. And this is I wonder if anybody knows where this is the coat of arms for. Not a hand goes up. Diane and I were in Peebles recently. Peebles is on the River Tweed, and you've got 3 fish, one of which is going the opposite way. And it's a reminder, these words mean going against the flow, that to some extent we are being called, aren't we, as Christians, to go against the flow of our culture, to be different. And it's good to be remembering that. And one of the ways in which we are reminding ourselves to be different is exactly this, remembering to meet together, that we are a family knitted together like a body, like an organism that we are really, because we belong together. And this is why this is here. Do not give up meeting together, such as some are in the habit of doing. We do that in church, and we get a lot of strength and support from one another. But Diane and I are coordinators of home groups. Heard of them? They're very important. There are about 15 groups, maybe more, because there are some that have sort of slipped the net and we don't keep tabs on everybody. Groups, 15 or so groups of maybe up to 10 or 12 people in each group, meeting during the week in people's homes, studying, sharing life's joys and pains and praying together. I and Diane, most of us here, are passionate believers in the importance of sharing our lives in that kind of way, different stages of our lives, helping each other to press on as followers of Jesus. So the question is, how good are you? If you would like to think about joining a home group and you're not, then Diane, who's much better at making notes than I am, she'll be at the back. And you know who Diane is. Also, the next thing that I think we need to be remembering is to become informed, to become a lifelong learner, as one of the chapters put it in the book that we've been looking at. One of the most brilliant things over the last 25 years is this, the Alpha Course. And a lot of people go to it who are established Christians and who just benefit from going along and being reminded to talk about the essential things of our Christian lives. Helping us to understand and remember where we stand. Because Peter says, be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope you have. And going to the Alpha Course, in my experience, I've done it a few times, is a way of embedding those basic things about what we believe. And I would strongly recommend that you bring people along who aren't in the life of the church, but Go along yourself as well, if that's possible. Next, remember moments. I wouldn't mind betting. Not that I'm a betting man, because my dad used to say, good boys don't bet. But I think that probably everybody here have got moments. You can recall moments when you somehow knew God's presence with you, when you knew a touch of the Lord. It's not just a cerebral, intellectual assent, but it's actually an experience. And the question is, do we remember those? It's a good thing sometimes to recall the things that have really moved us in the past. Do you have those? And the next thing really is related to that, but it's about the people who have played a part in our lives. And I don't know if you know who all these people are. I expect you do. Because that chap on the far left is the one I referred to. It'll be the communion table, John Wesley, and then Corrie ten Boom, Martin Luther, and of course Billy Graham. And those people may well, in their preaching or in the books they've written, and probably others, have touched your life. But there must be many, many others who are unknown to anybody else in this room because they were individuals. They might have been your Sunday school teacher, your youth leader when you were a young person. Might be your husband or your wife. Somebody that nobody else knows about has helped you to press on in your life with God. And the other one, sort of related to this, is a special place. I wonder if you have a special place. Jacob, when he had that dream about the ladder going up to heaven and the angels going up and down, after that dream, where he knew God has been speaking to him, he put a pillar up and he poured oil over it to say, this is a special place because God was here. Jeff Lucas writes in some of the magazines, Christian magazines, as a Pentecostal, I think, minister. He tells of when he was recently walking across a grassy field somewhere in the Isle of Wight. He deliberately walked across the field in the Isle of Wight. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to remember that years before, when he was a teenager, in a marquee, in a field like that, God spoke to him and called him to follow Jesus. And he went to that same place to remember what had happened in that point, in that place. This is one of my favourite buildings. It's an unprepossessing derelict chapel in a quiet village in North Wales. As an 18-year-old, about to be released from the restraints of home and school, launched away to the big city of London, I had been to a little group of Christian meeting, and I walked past this gate here, and I remember jumping for joy at that point, because I knew that God was with me, and I knew that my sins, which were many, had been forgiven, and I knew that my life was safe with God for the rest of my life. It's a really important point. Place for me. And I go past it every time. I think, thank you, Lord. That's where I met you. It's wonderful. And do you know, it was 4 years later, at the end of my teacher training course and degree, that I prayed in our cottage just up the road from here. Lord, I've got a job in North London. Lord, show me where I should go to church when I get to my job in North London. And I went for a service there. You can tell it was a long time ago. The weeds hadn't grown quite so badly. It was an operating church. And the minister there was from North London. And he said, where's your job, Tony? And I said, at Harrow County Grammar School. He said, that the land that adjoins my house, my manse, because he's a Methodist minister in that town, is where we're right next to each other. So come and join my church. And it was a fairly clear piece of guidance for me. And so that's another reason. We stood outside that gate, that rusty old gate, which wasn't quite so rusty in those days. So I want to ask you, is there a place that you can remember where God spoke to you, is there a place that you can go back to and say, yeah, God met me here? The last thing is this. This is a bit more serious. Memento mori. It means reminder that we're going to die. We don't often talk about this, but our faith has a long tradition of remembering that our lives are not going to go on and on forever here, that we will die. And preparing to die has been the responsibility of a Christian disciple. In the Book of Common Worship, there is a prayer that says, from famine and disaster, from violence and murder, from dying unprepared, good Lord, deliver us from dying unprepared. And I'm really impressed when I hear from some of my older friends in the life of this church that they are planning their own funerals. They are planning their own Thanksgiving service. They're putting together their hymns and their readings and any other things that they want to be included. And I think that's a really helpful, honest thing to be doing to prepare for the future. But beyond that, which we will all face, there is something rather more glorious than gloomy. And it is this. The quote from The Last Battle in the Narnia series. I have come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I've been looking for all my life, though I never knew it till now. And then C.S. Lewis, that's, I think, Lucy who quotes that. And then in ordinary text is this: all their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now at last they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story, which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. And there's somewhere else, C.S. Lewis writes this, about our life beyond, in God's company. The term, this is something I identify with, the term is over. The holidays have begun. The dream is ended. This is the morning. Amen.